Hey guys, it's Jasper, and today I'm going to be reading you a fairy type poem from Alice Through the Looking Glass, Lewis Carroll's The Jabberwocky. Pairing with Carroll's Jabberwocky, I'm going to be having some Voga white wine because summertime! As always, pour yourself something lovely to drink, relax, enjoy, and cheers. That's good. I've been tired today. 'Twas brilling, and the slithy toths did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the Beauregards and Mumraths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the Frumiswis Bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the Maxim's foe he sought. So rested he by the Tum-Tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the Tugly wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Ho frabulous day, calloo, callay, he trottled in his joy. 'Twas brilling, and the slithy toths did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the Beauregards and Mumraths outgrabe. Got a long way down to put that. I hope you guys enjoyed that reading. I'm sure this is not the first time you've heard the Jabberwocky poem. If it was, I hope it was a fair introduction. The thing that I love about this poem is Carroll's use of nonsense. I mean, certainly through the Looking Glass and Alice in Wonderland, he employs nonsense and does it well. But the Jabberwocky is such a excellent example of that. This is a poem I like to use with my students when talking about inventing and creating new things, and how if you say anything with confidence, people will generally believe it to be true. And it's neat to look in the poem and see how many things in it are made up words or invented words, and how despite that being so, despite so many of the words being things that if they were real words you wouldn't necessarily know the meaning, we sort of get the meaning by the way the poem falls, and we get the meaning of the words sort of based on how they're used, and it really reveals a lot about language and the complexity and the kind of really exciting, cool thing about language and how language works and communicates ideas and concepts. So I really love this poem for itself, for the aesthetics of itself, but also for the great example of nonsense and the great example of if you say something with confidence, even if it's all made up gibberish, people will take it as being true and they'll go, I'm so sorry, what was slithy? What does slithy mean again? What's a tov? A slithy tov? But also that makes me think another thing that it proves true is that sometimes if you say things with confidence, people won't necessarily even ask you to explain it because we get embarrassed of things that we don't know, and we would rather not look stupid by asking a question about what something means, and so we kind of let things go. Now, of course, it's always better to ask questions, but it's fun to be on the other end and to say things with confidence and invent worlds before your audience's eyes. So a little bit of context for the poem if you've never read Through the Looking Glass, which you should, because look at how tiny this is. And it's so much fun, and I'm so sorry, there's some lovely illustrations. Alice slaying the Jabberwocky. What comes before this is Alice finds a book, and she finds that it's some language I don't know, she said to herself, and it was like this, and it's all backward here. And then it says she puzzled over it for some time, but at last a bright thought struck her. Why, it's a looking glass book, of course, and if I hold it up to a glass, the words will go all the right way again. And this was the poem, and Alice read it. So then Alice reads the poem. So first of all, the poem is presented as something she has to discover. It's, oh, well, of course, it's a looking glass poem. And then she reads the poem, and she says, "It seems very pretty," she said when she had finished it, "but it's rather hard to understand." You see, she didn't like to confess, even to herself, that she couldn't make it all out. "Somehow, it seems to fill my head with ideas, only I don't exactly know what they are. However, somebody killed something, that's clear at any rate. But oh," thought Alice, suddenly jumping up, "if I don't make haste, I shall have to go back through the looking glass before I've seen the rest of the house is like. Let's have a look at the garden first." And then she goes on in the story, and she gets to the garden of live flowers. So again, if you haven't read this, give it a read. What I like about it is Carroll puts his finger right on exactly what I was talking about. That if you say something with confidence, often people are too afraid to ask questions about it. And Alice here, right, you know, you see she didn't like to confess, even to herself, that she couldn't make it all out. People are often people are afraid to look like they're stupid, to not know what a slithy tall is. But the thing is, does anyone know what a slithy tall is? Perhaps Lewis Carroll does, but maybe he doesn't really. But also perhaps that's not the point. And I think he puts his finger on something great, and it really reminds me a lot of academia, and sometimes how you can get as a student who is bombarded with critical theory and philosophy, and I suppose as a student, I mean speaking from the perspective as a literature student, you're bombarded with theory and critical stuff, and it just, sometimes you read things and you're like, exactly like Alice, where you're just like, somehow it seems to fill my head with ideas, only I don't know exactly what they are. And I was like, hashtag every student sometimes, because sometimes you have to read so much, it's hard to get it all in. I have just gotten into the habit that if I am reading something and I'm having trouble with it, sometimes I find the best thing to do is just to push through. And this is something I learned as a student. You push through it and go, I'll just have to reread it. Or I'll have to read what other people thought about it, and then I'll reread it. And it's all right to do that. It's all right to admit, you know, I read it and didn't quite know what happened. A great example of this, and actually this whole passage is reminding me so much of James Joyce. Joyce's work moves slowly, you know, from his short stories, Dubliners, moving into Portrait of the Artist, and then Ulysses, and then Finnegan's Wake. It moves into abstraction. And one of my favorite things to do, sort of like I've started doing this with some of my students and guests into my home, because my Joyce is right in the living room now, is have them read, you know, a page, the first, you know, paragraph of Portrait of the Artist, and the first paragraph of Ulysses, and then the first paragraph of Finnegan's Wake, which is absolutely, you know, off the rail into abstraction. And it's great because they can't help but laugh. And I think that, you know, Joyce was someone who, like Lewis Carroll, was moving into nonsense and abstraction, and really playing with what is art and what makes literature. And if I say something with confidence, or if it's printed, you know, under a good publishing house, is it then credible, and will people not ask questions? And I think that sometimes, you know, as somebody who really loves Joyce, the thing that I come across with Joycean critics is that sometimes people take Joyce too seriously. And as a result, they either really dislike him, or, you know, discussing Joyce is a little bit boring and dry. But I think the best way to take Joyce is to have some fun with him. And so it's for that reason that I love to read Joyce every summer. I read Portrait of the Artist every summer, and Ulysses every summer, and I'm hoping to add Finnegan's Wake into that match. I'm thinking maybe in September I'll read him, and we'll see how that goes. I've only ever read excerpts of Finnegan's Wake. But yeah, I save him for the summer because it's good fun to read Joyce in the summer. I like to take him to the beach and have something to drink, some rum or some white wine or some white wine with some rum, and just have a little bit of a laugh. And there's parts that are critical and that are beautiful, but there are parts that are just silly. All of that to say, what I love about the Jabberwocky poem is its employment of nonsense, to be, you know, more academic sounding. I love that it plays around with what words can do and what language does. And the other thing that I love about it is very fun to read. If you haven't ever read the Jabberwocky poem for yourself out loud, go do that. Google the Jabberwocky poem, print it off, and march around your house or your neighborhood or your nearest beach and read the Jabberwocky poem. If there's anything you'd like to talk about in particular with this poem, share that down below. If you have any questions, share that down below. If there's any fairy poems or stories you'd like me to read, share those down below. As always, guys, I hope whatever you've been drinking has been good and that it's been a fair match for the reading. Cheers.